The stars had never looked so threatening before. Commander Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue and green planet grow larger on his screen. Earth, they called it. Just another primitive world in his long career of conquest. Vextar had done this 47 times before. Find a world with intelligent life, study them for a few days, send the surrender message, wait for them to give up, then move in and add another species to the great Zenthari Empire. It was always the same pattern. It had worked for 3,000 years. The Zenthari Empire controlled 12 different alien species across hundreds of worlds. They were the masters of this part of the galaxy. Their technology was advanced. Their ships were powerful. Their weapons could destroy entire cities in seconds. No primitive world had ever said no to them. Behind Vextar, his science officer Gelnock studied the readings from Earth. The planet was strange compared to most worlds they conquered. The gravity was much stronger than normal. The atmosphere was full of oxygen and nitrogen, a dangerous mix that could burn through most ship hulls if not careful. The weather was violent and unpredictable. "Commander," Gelnock said in his clicking voice, "this world is classified as a death world by our standards. The dominant species should not be able to build advanced technology in such conditions." Vextar waved a clawed hand dismissively. "Primitive is primitive. Look at their ships. Chemical rockets, metal hulls, no energy shields, no plasma weapons. They barely have faster-than-light communication, let alone travel." The human ships did look crude compared to Zenthari technology. Boxy metal constructions that moved slowly through space using controlled explosions. Their weapons fired solid metal projectiles instead of energy beams. Their computers were electronic instead of bio-neural. By every measure the Zenthari used, humans were centuries behind. On Earth, alarms were ringing in every major city. President John Hayes sat in the emergency bunker deep under Washington, D.C. Around the table sat the most important people in human government and military. General Lisa Morgan represented the United Earth Defense Force, a new organization created just 5 years ago when humans first detected signs of alien life. Admiral Jake Peters commanded what humans optimistically called their Space Command. It consisted of 12 ships, most of them converted scientific vessels with weapons bolted on as an afterthought. Dr. Susan Blake was Earth's leading expert on alien life, though until 6 days ago that had been purely theoretical. "How long do we have?" President Hayes asked. Admiral Peters looked grim. "They'll reach Earth orbit in 18 hours. Our deep space sensors show 40 ships, each one bigger than anything we've ever built." Dr. Blake had been studying the alien signals for days. "Mr. President, their communication patterns suggest they've done this before. Many times. They seem to follow a standard procedure for contacting new worlds." As if summoned by her words, every screen in the room lit up with an incoming transmission. The image showed a tall reptilian creature with 4 arms and eyes like black mirrors. When it spoke, the translation computers turned its clicking sounds into English words. "Primitive inhabitants of the third planet," Vextar said, his voice carrying the bored tone of someone reading a script. "You have been selected for inclusion in the great Zenthari Empire. You have 72 standard time periods to prepare for peaceful integration. Gather your leaders. Prepare your surrender documents. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your species." The transmission ended, leaving the room in silence. President Hayes looked around the table, at the faces of Earth's leadership. Fear was there, certainly, but also something else, something the Zenthari had never encountered before in their 3,000 years of conquest. Anger. General Morgan stood up first. "Mr. President, with respect, I believe our response should be clear and simple." "What do you recommend, General?" Morgan's smile was cold as winter. "We tell them to go to hell." Dr. Blake frowned. "General, you've seen their ship sizes. Their technology is clearly superior to ours. Perhaps we should consider negotiation." Admiral Peters shook his head. "Doctor, I've read every historical account of first contact we have. Every story, every book, every movie. You know what happens to the people who surrender immediately? They disappear. Their culture dies. They become slaves or worse. General Morgan nodded. The Admiral is right. Besides, they made one critical error in their analysis. President Hayes leaned forward. What error? They assume we're like every other species they've conquered. Peaceful, soft, willing to give up when faced with superior force. Morgan's eyes hardened. They don't understand what it means to evolve on a death world. Every single day, for millions of years, our ancestors had to fight to survive. Not just against other animals, but against the planet itself. Dr. Blake was beginning to understand. The gravity alone would cripple most alien species. Our atmospheric pressure would crush them. Our weather patterns would seem like constant natural disasters. Exactly, Morgan continued. We didn't develop technology despite living on a death world. We developed it because we live on a death world. Every human invention came from trying to survive in conditions that would kill most alien species. Admiral Peters was studying the tactical displays. General, even if you're right about our advantages, they still outnumber us 40-12, and their ships are bigger. Morgan grinned, and it was not a pleasant expression. Admiral, has it occurred to you that maybe bigger isn't always better? Their ships are designed to intimidate primitives who surrender at first sight. Our ships were designed by a species that's been at war with itself for thousands of years. The President made his decision. General Morgan, prepare our response, make it clear. 2 hours later, every Zenthari ship in the solar system received a simple message broadcast on all frequencies. The translation was perfect, spoken in the calm voice of General Lisa Morgan. To the Zenthari Empire, thank you for your generous offer of slavery. We decline. If you want our planet, come and take it. On the bridge of his flagship, Vextar stared at the message in disbelief. In 47 previous conquests, no species had ever responded with defiance. They begged, they negotiated, they tried to buy time, they never simply said no. Commander, Gelnock said nervously, perhaps we should request additional ships from the home fleet. Vextar's laugh was harsh. Additional ships? To conquer primitives with chemical rockets? The High Council would strip me of rank for cowardice. He turned to his weapons officer. Prepare the fleet for attack. These humans will learn the price of defying the Zenthari Empire. On Earth, General Morgan stood at the command center watching the alien ships move into attack formation. Around her, technicians and officers prepared for humanity's first interstellar war. The odds were terrible. The enemy was more advanced. But Lisa Morgan had one advantage the aliens couldn't understand. She was human, and humans had never learned how to surrender. The first Zenthari ships entered Earth's atmosphere like falling stars. Commander Vextar watched from orbit as his assault craft descended toward the major human cities. This should be over in hours. The humans had no orbital defenses, no energy, weapons, no shields. Their primitive fighters couldn't possibly pose a threat to advanced Zenthari technology. He was wrong. Colonel Danny Wright sat in his F-35 fighter jet, leading the first squadron to engage the alien craft. The plane was old by human standards, but it had been modified with every trick Earth's engineers could think of. Reinforced frame to handle extreme G-forces, enhanced engines for speed and maneuverability, and weapons that the aliens had never seen before. Dragon Leader to all units, Danny spoke into his radio. Remember, these things have energy shields. But shields are designed to stop energy weapons. Our bullets are just chunks of metal moving really fast. The alien fighters looked elegant compared to human aircraft. Smooth, curved hulls that glowed with internal power. No visible weapons, just energy projectors that could slice through steel. They moved in perfect formation, exactly as their training manuals specified. Captain Amy Stone flew wing position beside Colonel Wright. She had been a test pilot before the aliens arrived, used to pushing aircraft beyond their normal limits. Now she pushed her fighter into a dive that would have killed most alien pilots from the G-forces alone. The first alien she encountered fired a plasma beam that should have vaporized her aircraft. Instead, it passed harmlessly around her as she rolled and twisted through the air in patterns no computer could predict. Amy's return fire was a stream of 20mm cannon shells moving at 3 times the speed of sound. The alien's energy shield flickered as the solid projectiles passed right through it. The shield was designed to deflect plasma and lasers, not solid matter. The shells tore through the alien hull like paper, and the elegant fighter exploded in a ball of fire. "Splash one," Amy called out, already turning toward her next target. Vextar watched in growing alarm as his fighters began falling from the sky. The humans flew like madmen, pulling maneuvers that should have been impossible. Their primitive aircraft twisted and rolled through patterns that made no sense, and their weapons, crude as they were cutting through his forces like they weren't even there. "How are they doing this?" he demanded of his tactical officer. "Commander, their pilots are pulling acceleration forces that would kill any known species, 15-20 times standard gravity. They should be unconscious or dead." On the ground, the Zenthari had even worse surprises waiting. Major Carlos Rivera commanded the ground defense around Los Angeles. His troops were armed with weapons, the aliens dismissed as primitive: chemical propellant firearms, explosive artillery shells, metal projectiles instead of energy beams. The aliens had based their invasion plan on fighting other advanced species. Their armor was designed to deflect plasma weapons. Their shields could stop laser fire. Their tactics assumed the enemy would use similar technology. They had never fought anyone who threw rocks really hard. Lieutenant Kelly Brown crouched behind cover as the first alien ground troops advanced down the street. They moved in textbook formation, their energy weapons charging up for precise shots. They were methodical, careful, exactly as their training taught them. Kelly's response was pure human chaos. She opened fire with her assault rifle, sending a stream of bullets downrange at 800 rounds per minute. The aliens dived for cover, confused by the rapid, seemingly random fire. Their shields flickered and failed as solid projectiles punched through energy barriers designed for a completely different type of warfare. "RPG," Kelly shouted, and Sergeant Rick Davis fired a rocket-propelled grenade into the alien formation. The explosion sent shockwaves that shattered their energy shields and left them vulnerable to conventional weapons fire. At the Pentagon, Dr. Susan Blake watched the battle unfold with growing understanding. She stood beside General Lisa Morgan at the command center, analyzing data from the fighting. "General, I think I understand what's happening," Dr. Blake said. "The aliens evolved on low-gravity worlds with stable climates. Their entire military doctrine is based on fighting other species like themselves." General Morgan nodded grimly. "And we evolved on a planet that's been trying to kill us since day one." The data supported her theory. Human soldiers were performing feats that should have been impossible. Corporal Marie Johnson had just carried a wounded comrade 3 miles through active combat, a load that would have crushed most alien species. Sergeant Davis was operating effectively after taking injuries that would have incapacitated any Zenthari warrior. "It's not just our technology they misjudged," Dr. Blake continued. "It's our biology. We're built for this kind of stress. High gravity, toxic atmosphere, extreme weather. What's a normal day on Earth would be a disaster scenario for most galactic species." The truth was becoming clear to both sides. The Zenthari had spent 3,000 years conquering species that were fundamentally similar to themselves. Peaceful civilizations that developed technology for exploration and comfort. Species that surrendered when faced with superior force because fighting meant certain death. Humans were different. They had developed technology specifically for warfare. Every human invention, from the wheel to the jet engine, had been turned into a weapon at some point. Their entire history was one long arms race against themselves. Captain Ben Clark piloted one of Earth's experimental space fighters into the orbital battle. The ship was crewed by alien standards, built in just 6 months using reverse-engineered alien technology. But it was designed by humans who understood something the aliens didn't. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense. Ben flew straight at a Zenthari cruiser, ignoring the plasma fire that lit up space around him. His ship's armor was steel and ceramic, primitive but effective against energy weapons designed to fight other energy-based technology. At the last second, he released his payload, a nuclear warhead attached to a simple rocket motor. The aliens had shields that could stop energy weapons. They had armor that could deflect plasma beams, but they had no defense against a primitive fission bomb moving at orbital velocity. The cruiser disappeared in a ball of nuclear fire. On his flagship, Vextar finally understood the magnitude of his error. These weren't primitives. They were predators from a death world, and he had just challenged them to a fight. "Signal the fleet," he ordered, his voice shaking. "All ships retreat to safe distance. Prepare emergency transmission to the High Council." His communication officer looked confused. "Commander, what should the message say?" Vextar watched another of his ships explode under human fire. On the planet below, his ground forces were being systematically destroyed by enemies who fought like demons. The humans weren't just winning. They were enjoying it. "Tell them we need reinforcements," he said quietly. "Tell them the humans are not what we expected, and tell them that we may have made a terrible mistake." The first battle for Earth was over. The mighty Zenthari fleet limped away from the blue planet, leaving half their ships as burning wreckage. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Zenthari Empire had been defeated. But Vextar knew this was just the beginning. The High Council would never accept such a humiliation. They would send everything they had to crush these impossible humans. He just hoped they would understand what they were really facing before it was too late. The Zenthari High Council chamber had not seen such chaos in 1,000 years. Council leader Mordeth stood at the center of the Great Hall, his forearms gesturing angrily as he read Vextar's report for the third time. "Impossible," he hissed, in the ancient Zenthari tongue. "A primitive species cannot defeat our technology. Vextar must be lying to cover his incompetence." War Marshal Kethrak disagreed. He was the Empire's greatest military commander, veteran of 50 successful conquests. His scaled hide bore the scars of countless battles, and his reputation was built on never losing a single engagement. "Council leader, I have studied the battle recordings," Kethrak said carefully. "The humans fought using tactics I have never seen. They ignore casualties that would break any civilized species. They use weapons that should not work against our defenses." Mordeth's eyes blazed with fury. "Then you will show them the true power of the Zenthari Empire. Take Battlefleet Prime. Glass their entire world if necessary. The galaxy must know that defying us brings only death." Battlefleet Prime was the Empire's greatest military achievement. 300 ships, including 12 massive dreadnoughts that could crack planets apart. Kethrak had used this fleet to conquer entire star systems. No enemy had ever stood against it and survived. On Earth, 6 months had passed since the first battle. Humanity had not wasted the time. In underground factories around the world, human engineers worked around the clock to build new weapons and ships. Engineer Commander Paul Green led the reverse engineering project from a bunker deep beneath Colorado. His team had taken apart every piece of alien technology they could find. The wreckage from the first battle provided crucial insights into how Zenthari systems worked. "The good news is their technology is advanced but predictable," Paul explained to Admiral Jake Peters during a briefing. "They use energy for everything. Weapons, shields, propulsion. It's efficient, but it has weaknesses." Dr. Helen Price had been working on a different approach. As head of the Biological Warfare Division, she had studied tissue samples from dead alien soldiers. What she found was disturbing but useful. "Admiral, these creatures evolved on worlds with almost no bacteria or viruses," she reported. "Their immune systems are practically non-existent compared to ours. A common human cold virus could kill them." Admiral Peters nodded grimly. "Doctor, prepare your countermeasures. If they want a biological war, we'll give them one they'll never forget." The human space fleet had grown from 12 ships to 40 in just 6 months. They were still smaller than alien vessels, but they were built using hard-learned lessons from the first battle. Captain Ben Clark commanded the new flagship USS Defiance, a ship designed specifically for fighting aliens. The Defiance looked nothing like the elegant alien vessels. It was angular, armored, and covered with weapons. Most importantly, it was fast. Human ships had abandoned the alien philosophy of massive, intimidating vessels in favor of speed and maneuverability. Captain Lisa White commanded the USS Revenge, a converted asteroid mining ship that had been turned into a mobile weapons platform. Commander Tony Brooks flew the USS Relentless, a ship so heavily armed it could barely carry enough fuel for a single battle. Each human vessel was unique, built by different teams with different ideas about how to kill aliens. The diversity was intentional. Human military doctrine was based on fighting other humans who were smart enough to adapt to any single strategy. Every human ship used different tactics, different weapons, different approaches to combat. When Battlefleet Prime arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system, Kethrak was confident of victory. His fleet was 8 times larger than the human. Of course, his ships were bigger, more advanced, more powerful. This would be a massacre. The battle began in the asteroid belt, far from Earth. Kethrak had expected the humans to defend their planet directly. Instead, they came out to meet him in open space, abandoning any defensive advantage. "Foolish primitives," he muttered, then ordered his fleet into standard battle formation. That was his first mistake. Captain Ben Clark led the human fleet in a charge straight at the alien formation. It looked like suicide to Kethrak, who ordered his ships to open fire at maximum range. Plasma beams and energy weapons lit up space as the aliens tried to destroy the approaching human ships. But the human vessels didn't fly in straight lines, like civilized warships. They twisted and rolled through space in random patterns, using their superior acceleration to avoid most of the incoming fire. What hits they did take were absorbed by armor designed to stop kinetic weapons, not energy beams. Captain Lisa White broke off from the main group and led her squadron in a flanking maneuver that brought them behind the alien formation. Her ships opened fire with railguns that fired solid metal slugs at tremendous velocity. The aliens' energy shields, designed to stop plasma weapons, were useless against chunks of metal moving at a significant fraction of light speed. Commander Tony Brooks took his ship straight through the center of the alien formation, firing in all directions as he passed. His vessel's armor was so thick that alien weapons barely scratched it, while his return fire tore through alien hulls like tissue paper. The alien formation began to break apart as individual ships tried to respond to attacks coming from multiple directions. Kethrak had trained his fleet to fight in organized formations against enemies who followed similar tactics. The humans fought like a pack of wild animals, with no apparent coordination but devastating effectiveness. "All ships, concentrate fire on the largest human vessel," Kethrak ordered, trying to restore order to the battle. That was his second mistake. The USS Defiance was not just the largest human ship, it was also the fastest. Captain Ben Clark had been waiting for the aliens to focus their attention on him. As soon as their weapons locked onto his ship, he activated a system that no alien vessel had ever carried. The Defiance exploded, but it was a controlled explosion, designed to look like the ship had been destroyed while actually launching dozens of smaller attack craft that had been hidden inside the hull. Each small craft carried a nuclear warhead and a pilot who had volunteered for a one-way mission. Sergeant Rick Davis piloted one of the suicide craft straight into the side of Kethrak's flagship. The nuclear explosion tore through the alien ship's hull, venting atmosphere and crippling its weapon systems. All across the battle zone, similar explosions lit up space as human pilots flew their craft directly into alien ships. It was a tactic no civilized species would ever use because it required soldiers willing to die for victory. Kethrak watched his fleet being destroyed by enemies who fought without regard for their own survival. These humans didn't just accept casualties, they used their deaths as weapons. "Signal all ships," he ordered with growing panic. "Full retreat. Return to home space immediately." But it was too late. The human ships were faster and more maneuverable than his remaining vessels. One by one, his great fleet was hunted down and destroyed by an enemy that refused to let them escape. War Marshal Kethrak died when Commander Sally Rogers flew her crippled fighter directly into his ship's bridge. His last thought was a single word of understanding that came too late. Predators. The wreckage of Battlefleet Prime drifted in space around Earth's sun. 300 of the Empire's finest ships had been reduced to scrap metal by 40 human vessels. The Zinthari Empire's greatest military commander was dead, along with most of his fleet. On Earth, the victory celebration was brief. Admiral Peters knew this was just the beginning. The aliens would be back, and next time they would bring everything. They had. But for the first time since the crisis began, He was starting to believe humanity might actually win. The news of Battlefleet Prime's destruction reached the Xanthari homeworld within hours. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Empire faced an enemy they could not defeat through conventional warfare. Council leader Mordeth stood in his private chamber, staring at the tactical displays that showed empty space where his greatest fleet should have been. "Impossible," he whispered, but the evidence was undeniable. 300 ships destroyed by 40 primitive vessels. War Marshal Kethrak dead along with the Empire's finest military commanders. The unthinkable had happened. His aide, a nervous young Xanthari named Velkan, approached carefully. "Council leader, the other council members are demanding an emergency meeting. Some are talking about negotiating with the humans." Mordeth's forearms clenched into fists. "Negotiate? With primitives who destroyed our fleet? Never. Ready the planet killers." Velkan stepped backward in shock. "Sir, the planet killers are forbidden weapons. They have not been used in over 1,000 years. These humans have proven they cannot be conquered by normal means," Mordeth said coldly. "If we cannot rule them, then they must be destroyed completely. Launch all 6 planet killer missiles immediately." The planet killers were the Empire's darkest secret, massive weapons designed to crack worlds apart from the core. They were built during the early days of Xanthari expansion, when some species had proven too troublesome to conquer. They had been used only 3 times in history, each time destroying entire civilizations. On Earth, Dr. Susan Blake was working late in her laboratory when the alarms began to sound. She had been studying captured alien data files, trying to understand Xanthari technology better. What she found in the files made her blood run cold. "General Morgan," she called urgently into her communicator. "You need to get down here immediately. I found something in the alien database." General Lisa Morgan arrived within minutes, still wearing her combat uniform from the latest strategy meeting. The victory against Battlefleet Prime had given humanity hope, but everyone knew the aliens would respond with something worse. "What did you find, Doctor?" Dr. Blake's face was pale as she showed the translated files on her computer screen. "They have weapons called planet killers, missiles designed to destroy entire worlds. And according to this data, 6 of them are already heading toward Earth." The general studied the information with growing alarm. The missiles were already in space, moving at tremendous speed toward Earth. They would arrive in less than 48 hours, and Earth's defenses could not stop them. "How do we fight something like this?" General Morgan asked. "We don't," Dr. Blake replied quietly. "These weapons are designed to crack planets apart. There's no defense against them. When they hit, Earth dies." President John Hayes received the news in the emergency bunker. Around the table sat the surviving leaders of humanity, their faces grim as they absorbed the reality of their situation. Earth had won 2 battles against the aliens but now faced complete extinction. "Options?" the president asked simply. Admiral Jake Peters spoke first. "We could try to evacuate, but we don't have enough ships to move even a fraction of our population. Most of humanity would die anyway." Engineer Commander Paul Green had been studying the alien technology for months. "Mr. President, we have learned one important thing from the captured alien ships. We know where their homeworld is located." "What are you suggesting, Commander?" "If Earth is going to die, then we make sure the aliens pay the price. We load every ship we have with volunteers and our deadliest weapons. We take the fight to their home system." General Morgan nodded slowly. "Operation Exodus. We've been planning it as a last resort. If we're going to die anyway, at least we die fighting." The president looked around the table at the faces of Earth's leadership. These were the people who had guided humanity through its first interstellar war. Now they were planning humanity's final battle. "How many people can we evacuate?" Admiral Peters consulted his notes. "We have 63 operational ships of various sizes. We can take maybe 50,000 people maximum, out of 8 billion. The silence in the room was deafening. 50,000 survivors out of all humanity. It wasn't evacuation, it was the preservation of the species. "Who goes?" President Hayes asked. General Morgan answered without hesitation. "Volunteers, military personnel, scientists, engineers, people who can fight, and people who can rebuild. No politicians except those who can actually contribute to the war effort. President Hayes smiled sadly. Then I guess I'm staying behind with Earth. Within 24 hours, Operation Exodus was underway. Across the planet, 50,000 humans said goodbye to their families and friends, knowing they would never see Earth again. They boarded ships that would carry them to the enemy's home system for a final battle against impossible odds. General Morgan commanded the Exodus fleet from the bridge of the USS Vengeance, a ship built from the wreckage of alien vessels. Beside her stood Admiral Peters, Colonel Danny Wright, Major Carlos Rivera, and the other survivors of Earth's military leadership. The fleet launched just as the first planet-killer missile entered Earth's solar system. Behind them, 8 billion people waited for death, watching their planet's final defenders disappear into the darkness between stars. The journey to the Zenthari homeworld took 6 weeks. During that time, the Exodus fleet established hidden bases on asteroids and dead worlds throughout Zenthari space. They used captured alien ships to move undetected through the Empire's territory, preparing for a guerrilla war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Captain Amy Stone, now commanding a stolen Zenthari warship, led the first strike against a major alien military base. Her ship looked like any other Zenthari vessel until it opened fire with human weapons, destroying the base before anyone realized what was happening. Major Kelly Brown led commando teams that infiltrated alien worlds, making contact with the subject species that the Zenthari had conquered over the centuries. The humans brought a simple message: the Empire could be defeated, and now was the time to rebel. The subject species had been waiting for this moment for generations. The Zenthari had ruled through fear and superior technology, but they had never faced an enemy that could match their technology and surpass their brutality. When the human-led rebellions began, they spread like wildfire across the Empire. Captain Ben Clark, commanding a new ship built in secret asteroid shipyards, struck at the heart of Zenthari space. His target was their military academy, where the Empire trained its future commanders. The attack was perfectly timed to occur during graduation ceremonies, when the Academy held the Empire's most promising young officers. No one survived. Within 2 years, the 1,000-year-old Zenthari Empire was collapsing. Their military was scattered, their subject species in open revolt, and their core worlds under constant attack by an enemy that struck without warning and showed no mercy. Council leader Mordeth died when human commandos stormed his palace on the Zenthari homeworld. His last words were a question that would never be answered. What have we unleashed? The war ended not with a great battle, but with the simple reality that the Zenthari Empire no longer existed. Their worlds had been liberated by their former subjects. Their military had been destroyed by human-led coalitions. Their government had fallen to enemies they had created through their own cruelty. In the ruins of what had once been the galaxy's greatest empire, a new power began to emerge. The Terran Federation was built on the ashes of the Zenthari Empire, led by the survivors of a dead world who had turned their grief into vengeance. General Morgan, now Admiral of the Federation fleet, stood on the bridge of her flagship as it approached a newly discovered world. The planet's inhabitants had just developed radio technology, taking their first steps toward joining the galactic community. "Signal the planet," she ordered. Standard first contact protocol. Her communication officer, a young human named Pete Davis, son of the late Sergeant Rick Davis, sent the message that would become standard throughout human space. "Greetings from the Terran Federation. We come in peace, but we are prepared for war. Join us willingly and we will protect you from all enemies. Threaten us and you will learn why the galaxy fears the children of Earth." The message was simple, direct, and honest. It offered friendship to those who wanted it, and promised destruction to those who chose violence. It was a perfect reflection of humanity's new place in the galaxy. Earth was gone, but her children lived among the stars, and they remembered everything.